In the UK, Muslim men make up 3% of the British population. 3%.
That's nothing though. That's
Well, they're responsible for 90% of the gang, and 30% of the men who have committed these gangs are called Mohammed. Muslim migrants imported into the nation have come in and they're raping their way through the country. And that's the same in the UK. Murders, rapes, 77% of the rapes last year in Paris. 77% of the rapes in Paris. Now, again, is this something you're willing to sacrifice and play a game with?
Immigration is a hot topic these days. Check out this discussion about immigration policy. We'll watch it together and then talk about it. But first, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Check this out.
The warning is what I've experienced, what we've experienced in the UK with open border mass immigration, and then the problems that come from it. So, as I said, I'm from a town called Luton Town. It's 30 miles north of London. What I witnessed growing up was segregation, non-assimilation, non-integration. So the town is divided. It's divided via religious lines, not racial lines, religious lines. When I went to school, you had the Muslim playground and the non-Muslim playground. We didn't create that. So everyone, I was brought up, my mum was an immigrant to the UK. She come from Ireland, but most of my friends are sons of immigrants. Luton Town is one of the most diverse towns in Europe. It's also named by the CIA as the epicenter of terrorist activities for Europe. That's Luton Town. That's where I've been born. So problems that were far away when you think of terrorism or you think of jihad or you think of all these things are going to sound unbelievable to an audience. You have to really go down the rabbit hole on what was allowed to happen in our country. In our country, across every town and city, there was a conspiracy of silence of political leaders, religious leaders. Every institution whose job it was to protect children failed. They allowed a generation of Britain's daughters to be raped. Sorry.
No.
They allowed a generation of Britain's daughters to come under.
Speak freely.
To be kidnapped, tortured, and across the whole of the UK. Now, my cousin was one of these victims. But so growing up in Luton, I'd seen this. Do you know how many girls I went to school with whose parents they went missing? The girls were gone. The girls were gone, disappeared. So I'd seen this growing up my whole life. I'd seen the Islamic community act in a way where the authorities, the government, the police just didn't deal with the crimes. They just did not. They just were allowed. And it wasn't like I use the term that it was iron fists for the black and white community, but kid gloves for the Islamic community. There was no level playing field in how we were treated. And now these terminologies of two-tier policing, they've become part of British vocabulary now. Everyone understands this problem. But I saw it very early on, and I spoke about it very early on. My first ever time of talking about this issue, I organised my first protest in 2004.
Wow.
I was a young man, yeah. An Afghani migrant in the UK is 22 times more likely to commit a sexual assault than a British citizen.
It's cultural.
So it's a total different value system.
Yeah.
You open your borders to it. These are the problems that come from it. And if the public were allowed to realise the dangers and problems that come from it, they'll start looking at the government, because it's government failure and policy that's allowed this to happen. And rather than allow this discussion in the UK, the tactic has been to crush or silence any criticism whilst they maintain their open border policy. In the UK, Muslim men make up 3% of the British population. 3%.
That's nothing though. That's
well, they're responsible for 90% of the gang, and 30% of the men who have committed these gangs are called Mohammed. If you want to look at statistics in Germany, I think it's 56 or 58% of the rapes were by Muslim migrants. They make up less than 10%. Sweden, 63%. 63% of the rapes in Sweden, Muslim migrants imported into the nation, have come in and they're raping their way through the country. And that's the same in the UK. Murders, rapes, 77% of the rapes last year in Paris. 77% of the rapes in Paris. Now, again, is this something you're willing to sacrifice and play a game with?
Do you remember, I'm sure you do, the Summer Olympics where one of the girls was raped and she pretended that she couldn't identify her attacker because she was afraid of
being called racist?
Yes.
Well, in the UK, this is...
Yes.
So we get to 2009. This is my story. I do this first demonstration. I face relentless attacks, violence. My house is smashed up. But at the time, I'm part of a group of young Englishmen that go to football together. You know? And so if I went out on the town for those 4 or 5 years, I had to go out in a group of 20 or 30 men, because otherwise I'm under attack. Now, so I know at this point, I've grown up with Muslims. I know how they act. I know how they behave. I know how they think. I know all of it, yeah, and I've grown up in that environment, and I know there's only one thing they actually respect, and it's strength, and that's just the fact. They respect strength. You show them weakness, they'll run all over it. So come to 2009, our soldiers are attacked. I then decide that and I sit down with my cousin and say, if we allow this, like the progression here, and it actually moves on, you see where it goes, because this same group who protested against our soldiers and attacked our soldiers, well, 2 years later, they beheaded one of our soldiers. And the man who beheaded him, I'd already made a video telling the public who he was the year before. And looking at this group, this was the group that we were confronting, yeah? And they went on to behead Lee Rigby, as a British soldier, in the streets of our capital city. They took his head off in the street, yeah? Now, this was the progression of a process. What you're seeing there in New York, this is where it's going. I'm telling you, this is, and there's nowhere else it's going, okay? Especially as in the United States, they've got firearms. So you're going to see an explosion coming to your country that you need to prepare for. And you're quite lucky, but lucky in the sense that you've got brave politicians, even talk show hosts, that are willing to have this discussion. This is a difficult discussion to have. Like, there's so many problems that are coming. Say, for example, Pakistani men make up 3% of the British population. They're responsible for 33% of child defects, because in some cities, 76% of them marry their cousins. Yeah. You will allow, like we have, the problem's so big, we can't deal with it. So then the terrorism front and the threat of violence from a hostile, aggressive community, because they will riot. You see those New York? You go and try and move them. So you see where they're praying in your capital? Try and move them. Watch what happens.
It's a full-blown street fight.
What happens when you change the population, the culture, and the moral foundations of a society faster than that society can absorb or educate the newcomers? The honest answer is that it doesn't end well. There are two truths that we have to hold together. Every human being is created in the image of God. The stranger, the refugee, the immigrant, each carries infinite dignity. We should never speak of people as if they are a problem or statistics or parasites. They're people with a name, with a face, and with a story. The second truth that we have to keep in mind is that a society is also something sacred. It's a home that's built over centuries by a shared story, by shared responsibilities, by shared moral commitments. And if you weaken those bonds too quickly, if you overload them recklessly, you don't get compassion, you get chaos. To be moral, you have to care for the stranger. To be responsible, you have to protect the home. A serious immigration policy has to include both of those. The problem is not that we have immigration. The problem is that in much of the West, we have mass immigration without serious moral conversations about limits, about integration, about loyalty to the values of the host society. We've treated borders as an embarrassment, not as a necessity. We've confused compassion with abdication of responsibility. When immigration becomes uncontrolled, three things begin to fray. The first thing is trust. Citizens start to feel that the decisions affecting their streets and their schools, their hospitals, are being made over them, not with them. They feel ignored, even despised for raising legitimate concerns. That anger that they have is not racism. It's what happens when people sense that the basic covenant between government and governed is being broken. Second thing that begins to fray is cohesion. A nation is not a hotel where everyone can just check in and live as they please. It's a family of communities that's held together by a moral code. When large numbers arrive who are not taught firmly and lovingly what that code is about the rule of law, the equality of men and women, the protection of minorities, the sanctity of life, you're no longer integrating, you're importing parallel societies. The third thing that begins to fray is truth. We know there are real problems, crime that's linked to gangs, honor-based violence, radical preachers, neighborhoods where the law of the land is replaced by the law of fear. To deny these facts, to censor those who raise them is not kindness, it's cowardice. And cowardice always empowers the very extremists that we fear. So let's be absolutely clear. It's not bigotry to say that a country has the right and the duty to control its borders. It's not hatred to say that if you enter a nation, you accept its laws, its norms, and its deepest values. It's not racism to say we will not import ideologies that despise the freedoms that our parents and grandparents fought and died to defend. In fact, that is what love of country looks like. Not shouting slogans, but protecting the moral ecology that helps everyone, that keeps everyone, including immigrants, safe. So yes, we have to come down hard, not on immigrants as human beings, but on a system that has treated our borders as optional, our values as negotiable, and our citizens' concerns as intolerable. We need fewer slogans and more standards, fewer open-ended promises and more clearly enforced laws, less guilt for saying no, and more pride in protecting what is good and precious in our civilization. Because a society that cannot say no to destructive ideas will eventually lose the ability to say yes to the good, the beautiful, and the true. So let's recover a policy that is both firm and humane, firm in defending borders, laws, and values, humane in remembering that even the person we turn away is still a child of God. A nation that forgets its heart becomes cruel. A nation that forgets its spine becomes weak. Our task in this generation is to refuse both temptations and to build an immigration policy strong enough to protect our future and principled enough to honor the image of God in every human face. If you like this content overall, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Take care.